Hello everyone, welcome to the Town Manager Download, a podcast about local government in the town of Shrewsbury. Today's podcast episode is going to cover the budget process for the town, and later on in the show we'll be joined by David Snowdon, Assistant Town Manager for Administration and Finance. I'm Kevin Mizikar, Town Manager of the town of Shrewsbury. As always, I'm happy to be joined by Principal Department Assistant Taylor Galusha. What's going on, Taylor?
We had an exciting last, week, month, 2 months, 2 weeks of soccer, football.
Almost.
2 weeks?
No,
month?
It's all been exciting. There's been a lot going on with the World Cup. It's kept me entertained since the week before Thanksgiving. So finally have crowned a new champion, and the Argentines, I'm not sure how to say that. Argentinians. Lionel Messi wins the World Cup. Everyone's happy about that, except if you're French, I guess.
Yeah, I saw a fact, I don't know if it's legit, but it's been a really long time since I don't know.
You can't
It's been a long time since the South American and Central American team won the World Cup.
Yeah.
It's stayed in Europe the
Yeah,
last,
right. I think
20
since
years.
Argentina, well, no, because Brazil wins the World Cup quite often. Stop
Fake
spreading
news.
fake
Fake news.
Town Manager Download. We're not allowed to do that. So, there's been a lot going on through the holiday season as we tape this on the lead up to Christmas. Hanukkah's in full swing. New Year's right around the corner. Cold weather's here. So having the World Cup's been good. Yeah.
Ticketmaster scams.
Sounds like you tried to get into Taylor Swift.
3 times.
3 times.
I did get a ticket.
Yeah, there you go.
It was a traumatic process. I don't want to talk about it.
When's that, this summer?
May 21st.
Nice. Gillette?
Yes.
Awesome. Well, congratulations. You beat the system.
I did. I won the Taylor Swift Hunger Games.
All the bots.
Maybe not one, but
Beat the bots. I'll get you a t-shirt.
Participation medal. I beat the bots.
Awesome.
We have a lot going on in Shrewsbury too right now.
Right.
Not just the other world things.
That's true. Yep. There's things going on outside of Qatar. So over the past few weeks, the Beals Elementary School project formally closed out, held their final building committee meeting. That project is one for the history books, came in $6 million or more under budget. Huge savings to the taxpayers in Shrewsbury. We started off the project and we were being diligent. We borrowed 90% of the total money that we thought we needed. And in the end, we didn't have to borrow any more, and there's $3 million or so still left over. So that's huge. That's real savings to the taxpayers for the next 20 years, honestly. That's
been going on since, planning's been longer, but they started meeting 2015, 2016. So.
Right, yeah, those projects take a long time to get state approval and all the design and local approval, and they get off to a really slow start, and then construction starts happening, and it's kind of hard to believe, but we've made it to the end. So the committee met and finalized everything, and the project is officially closed out at the local level, and we're just waiting for the final audit at the state level. So huge congratulations to the building committee and everyone that's been involved in that, and the people that advocated and put in a lot of time and effort. It was a really good project. So, and it's kind of funny because we're actually getting pretty close to the finalization of the construction of the police station as well. And we talked a lot about that with Chief Anderson. The building committee actually took a tour after their meeting last week and got to see a lot of their planning work as they have throughout the course. Can't wait for residents to come in and take a tour early next spring. If you drive by the building at night, see a blue light up in the transom windows, which is pretty cool. I like that touch. It's a unique feature. And I saw a truck with a changeable message board that popped out of the back of it the other day, and saw people like Mo DiPaolo staring at it. So I'm sure that's something to do with the project. Kristen Loss was standing in the middle of this sacred acre, staring at a TV screen in the back of a truck. So
Awesome.
it has to be due to that project. Or
Probably.
I just didn't get invited to the watch party for something really fun. But who knows? I'm sure they're getting excited about putting the finishing touches on the police station as well. So
I remember when we did the last tour of Beale, like when we did the Beale Building Committee tour, when it was like almost done, and the few times I've gotten to get a tour of the police station, it's been exciting just seeing it all come together. So
yeah, it really is.
Can't imagine, like I know Chief Anderson talked about it, but I know they're all getting super excited.
Definitely.
I think we are too, just to close that chapter and,
get conference space.
Yeah, that'd be nice. No more conference space Hunger Games either.
Exactly. So when we're having this conversation, we're nearing the end of December, and we look forward to turning the page to the new year, and that's always a good reset for everyone. And Taylor, you've been doing a heck of a job to improve public engagement and have new people volunteer for different things. And one of those first things that come up as we turn to the new calendar is papers will be available for new elected positions for town meeting and those other elected positions throughout the community, the select board, the school committee, the library board of trustees. So obviously big elected positions in the town, but it is an opportunity for people to step up their participation and find new ways to engage and be involved if they're interested in that. So that's kind of like a what's around the corner. Stay tuned. Town clerk will be sending information out about that, and it'd be great to have every town meeting seat filled and not have to worry about write-in candidates. And if anyone's interested, they can obviously reach out to us, and we'll answer any questions that they may have about those positions. And a sneak preview, we anticipate having some public engagement opportunities about those elected positions in the new year, which will be a new and unique feature that we'll talk a little bit more about in the near future. So there's another survey coming out from the town. I hope people just know that we're really interested in getting the information from them and getting their feedback as much as we can. And we don't want to annoy anyone, but we want to do what the residents want us to do, because that's what we're here for. So.
Yard waste.
Yeah, yard waste survey. I kind of hold my breath whenever I think about asking residents what they think about the yard waste program, because there's probably 0 out of 38,000 that think we did a good job, which is fair, because we've had some challenges the last couple cycles. In the end, we've done everything that we've promised, but too many bumps along the way. So the more heads that we can put together on this issue and find solutions, the better off we'll always be. So we want to get some feedback from residents. And as we talk about engagement, we talk about all these things that we're hoping to have residents help us on. How can residents get information from the town about things like the yard waste survey? Like, what are their options?
I think the town website is probably the most catch-all for residents, and it's through the sign up for alerts button that people are greeted with on the homepage when they visit shrewsburyma.gov, and they can sign up for a variety of listservs that different town departments use to push out information. So there's a solid waste and recycling listserv that our friends in the DPW use to notify residents about delays, yard waste collection, and different updates. So like when the mattress ban came out a month or so ago, that was a main form of communication that DPW used. But all departments have it. There's one for Parks and Rec. There's one for the health department. The town manager's office has one. The select board has one. And people can get notifications through their email or text messages as well. We do have a mobile app that has kind of gotten lost in the translation of summertime and
shine a light on it.
I know, this is my time.
Let's not lose it.
So we have Shrewsbury MA, which is our mobile app. So if residents search it in the App Store, It's a app version of our website that they can sign up for all those type of notifications and get them as like push notifications to their phone. So it doesn't have to necessarily go through their email.
Awesome.
It'll show up as like a normal notification that you get for any other app. I think that's really exciting. It was one of the first things that I started working on when I started here. And I think it's super convenient for residents. And I'm signed up for all my boards and committees and calendars, so I know what's going on even when I'm not here.
Awesome.
That's the best way.
So the Shrewsbury MA
Mobile app.
and where you get your apps, right? That's what they say
App,
on shows
yeah,
like this.
App Store, Apple
Store.
App Store, and
Yep.
Google Play, I think are the two.
Awesome.
So, yep.
All right. And I
our
know people
best.
have questions for us. How can they get in touch with us? Town Manager download,
At shrewsburyma.gov.
TM download at shrewsburyma.gov. Awesome.
Send your questions.
Yeah, send questions, please. We will fit them into upcoming episodes. We'll get them answered for you. We always want to keep the content fresh and make sure we're relevant in answering the questions that you have. So TM download at shrewsburyma.gov. Please reach out to us. We look forward to hearing what you have to say or reading what you have to say. So I think that takes us into the conversation that we want to have today, which is really talking about financials and the budget process, and which is really timely as we talk about this, because we're, I would say, nearing the end of the first third of the budget. So let's talk a little bit about the budget process today, and in a few minutes we'll bring David Snowdon in, who is going to be commissioned the budget czar after this podcast today.
Right.
All right.
But you play a big role in our budget process as the town manager, and I know we say it every week, but like it's different community to community and across the nation too,
Right.
how we function to put our budget together. You want
Yeah.
to talk about a little bit about your role, the town manager's role in general?
Yes. Yep. So it's really founded. We talk about this every episode too. Most times, you know, everything in local government, especially in Massachusetts, is so tied to specific general laws in Massachusetts or local laws. And Shrewsbury was one of those really leading communities in the 1950s that set up its own form of local government that was different than the default that was kind of permitted under the general laws at the time. So there's a 1953 Town Manager Act, and really, especially in the budget, there's a section 16 that's called Estimate of Expenditures within the town manager's responsibilities. And it requires the town manager to go out and ask each and every department what expenditures are they going to have to take on in the following fiscal year. And then it's my responsibility, not less than 90 days prior to the start of the annual town meeting, to submit a budget to the Finance Committee and the Select Board, which I will quote here, and this is what I think we really do: contain a careful, detailed estimate of the probable expenditures of the town for the ensuing fiscal year. So you have to include debt service and operating needs and salaries and wages. You know, that all comes into me from the experts in those individual departments on those boards and committees, but it's up to me to synthesize this information and balance the budget. So whether it's the school department or the Department of Public Works, as those departments identify their expenditure needs, I'm only permitted to send it along to the Finance Committee and the Select Board if our revenues are estimated to match those expenditure needs. So that's really step one, and that's where we are right now. Actually, the precursor to that is looking at the revenues. So each year we start off with how much money are we going to have, so we can provide guidance out to departments whenever we ask them for what we can expend. There's limited opportunity because of the challenges that we face with the general laws, but yeah, it really starts off with the town manager officially asking departments, what is you going to need to spend the money on within the next fiscal year. So
What is a fiscal year, I guess, just getting into like what our actual budget cycle is, because clearly it's super tied to our general laws in Shrewsbury with
Right.
that 90-day notification period that we have for the Finance Committee and Select Board.
Yeah. So our fiscal year, like all municipalities in Massachusetts, is July 1 through June 30th. So yes, we're talking about developing a budget right now more than 6 months in advance of when that fiscal year will actually start. But that's because our budget process is very transparent, and we go through not only the select board, but the finance committee as we review what the town manager proposes in that first step.
And our fiscal year is different than the state, which is different than the federal.
Yeah, it's different than same as the state, different than federal. So I think it's a challenge that it's the same as the state, because we're always waiting for the state to pass their budget, which they don't always pass it before the start of their fiscal year.
Right.
So that's where their challenge comes in. They don't follow their own rules. So
And we
it
end
looks
up
like they're different.
having special town meeting
Yep.
in the fall,
Correct.
sometimes, or not sometimes, most
Yep.
of the time because of that,
That's right.
to make any not corrections, but updates that we need to make, because
Right.
we don't have all the information.
So we talk about this all the time. So there's always like 3 budgets in play. We're closing out the prior year budget. We're expending the current year budget, and we're preparing for the following year budget. So in the fall, we're looking at revenues and tying up. We're looking at revenues for the upcoming fiscal year, and we're closing out the prior fiscal year. And then in the winter months, we're really developing the budget for the next fiscal year. And then, of course, after town meeting authorizes us, and then we get back to July 1, we start spending that new budget. So it's a consistent cycle. There's really no week that goes by that we're not thinking of some aspect of that budget cycle that we talk about.
So what are those big landmark steps, I guess, in the budget cycle that residents might want to, that should be aware of or would be looking for on agendas?
Yeah. So
as the year start, or not, I guess the fiscal year starts.
Yeah, so I would say in October, residents will see, just like this year, they'll see that we start presenting our estimate of revenues for the following July. And the select board hears that proposal, and they meet with the school committee, and they talk about what revenues that we're projecting and how those may have changed from prior forecasts. What has shaken out over the last 12 months, and what are we looking at now? And then kind of goes quiet for a couple months. And then in February, the town manager presents the budget. So it gets publicized on the website, and it goes to the finance committee, and they begin holding hearings in the late winter months and late March. That's probably the biggest opportunity for residents to engage in the budget process. We sit with the finance committee normally through the course of an entire evening from 6 o'clock to 10 o'clock on a Thursday night, and then from 8:30, 9 o'clock in the morning that next Saturday through 4 o'clock that afternoon. And we go line by line through, really, in the operating budget, what ends up being like $140 million worth of expenditures. And every time we get to the end of a department, the finance committee turns to anyone there that's in the public and says, does the public have any questions about what's in this budget proposal? And anyone can ask any question. It's, there's no question that's too small. There's no question that's too big. It's important for residents to understand how we spend the money, and that's their biggest opportunity to do it. It's the broadest opportunity. Anyone can come to that. Once we get beyond the finance committee budget process, it ultimately lands at town meeting in May. And the 240 elected members of town meeting have the opportunity to ask questions and ultimately vote on the spending plan for the upcoming year. Does it meet their needs? Do they have questions about why we'd want to do this, that, or the other thing? So really open process here, and having a representative town meeting process for people to engage throughout.
What kind of makes up that budget? I guess when a resident is looking at a budget book or budget document, it might seem overwhelming a little bit, and some terms might be unfamiliar.
Yep.
Do you want to just talk a little bit about like what our local receipt
Sure.
is,
Yeah.
what
Yeah.
that type of stuff?
Yeah. Yeah, so I mean, it's just like every business or personal finances, there's the income, the money that we receive, and then there's the expenditures, the money that you send out. So when we think about income, we have a couple primary sources of money. The largest is the tax levy, property taxes. If you own property in Shrewsbury or any other town, city in Massachusetts, you pay property taxes, and that's our largest source. It's over half, 60% of our total revenues, over $100 million come in from that. Then there's state aid is our second largest revenue source, and that's literally money that we receive from the Commonwealth of Massachusetts to spend on particular things, mainly education. And there's a unique term in Massachusetts called local receipts or Schedule A receipts or cherry sheets is state aid, but local receipts or Schedule A receipts. And that's just money that's generated within the community and is primarily made up of excise taxes. So taxes on the value of motor vehicles when they're purchased, and then throughout their lifetime, hotel, motel charges, special assessments on meals at restaurants. It's our third largest revenue category, and it's really elastic. It really goes up and down with economic conditions in the community. So when residents and people who are in the community are spending more money, then local receipts are up because when you buy cars or you're going out to eat, the town gets a very small percentage of the tax associated with those types of transactions. And then I think the other most important category for residents to know about is what is termed enterprise funds, and they're special lines of business. Water and sewer are the most prominent that residents can think about. So we tax generally whenever and spend those dollars on broad things like police and fire, but whenever we can quantify the amount of water a resident consumes or something like that, we charge a rate for that. So it's fair to each resident. So everyone wants police and fire at any time, but some people may use more or less water than others. So when there's more or less water, things like that, we charge a rate. So all those utilities that come in, water, sewer, stormwater, our pay-as-you-throw bag program for curbside trash collection, that makes up about $20 million in revenue. So really, the tax levy, the state aid, the local receipts, and those enterprise funds, which are dedicated only for the use for those particular departments, make up 90% of where we get our funds from. And then it just goes into the operations of the town, everything that people see us do: police, fire, public works, plowing the streets. It doesn't include Selco. You know, that's probably the biggest thing. Selco runs their own budget, separate and apart from the town, based upon the rates that they assess for utility consumption and cable and things like that.
That's the operating budget.
Correct. Yep. Day to day, what do we do on a day-to-day basis? Employee salaries, public works, custodians, things like that.
And school is wrapped in.
School is wrapped in. Yep. Teachers, sure. Largest portion of the budget as a single area of expenditure are the public schools, and of that $140 million round number, it's about $80 million of that is the school system.
And we do a lot of planning around our capital expenditures. You want to just explain the difference of what the capital expenditures are and what, I guess, different from the operating budget, the expenditures.
I mean, capital is our major expenses, have purchases that we make that have a lifespan, a good or vehicle that have a lifespan of more than 5 years and cost more than $50,000. We call them one-time purchases because it's a little misleading. Obviously, if you buy a motor vehicle, it's only going to last 5 or 10 years, but we don't have to buy that same motor. Yeah, exactly. So those go into a separate warrant article. It's a separate expenditure plan, and it's set aside from the operating budget. And it, in some ways, the things on the list for the capital improvement plan are wildly different every year,
Yeah.
but we spend about $2 million a year on capital
And
improvements.
it's generally planned for
Yes.
in advance.
Yep.
Or not generally, it is planned for in advance.
Yep. So when we look at the operating budget, we ask departments to think years out and what their needs are going to be, but we only require them to submit expenditures for the upcoming year. But when the capital plan is submitted, they have to submit for the next 5 years. And it's updated every year, so we make changes, improvements over time. But because of the size,
Yeah.
a fire truck is, a simple engine is almost $1 million. And when we're only spending $2 million on total capital improvements every year, that money goes really fast. So we need to look out far to make sure that we have the revenue in place and plans to be able to do that. No one wants to go an extra year with a fire truck that may not be reliable.
Right. So we're looking at like useful life of these things, getting the best and longest
Yep.
use out of what we're spending.
Yeah, and we have a large vehicle fleet, over 200 different pieces of equipment in that fleet, and we have a fleet management division that's a part of the Department of Public Works, and they're doing a heck of a lot of work and kind of modernizing how they do business. It's division manager is Joel Kimball, and he does a really wonderful job. Like we're migrating to electric vehicles, we have hybrid vehicles, and those guys are kind of, caught between so many worlds. We have old dump trucks, we have new EVs, and they have to service it all. They do, most of the maintenance, and it's a, very focused effort just to manage that fleet. So they're really helping us plan for the life cycle of those vehicles. They'll come in and they'll say, dump truck 10, it may only be 8 years old, but it's got a lot of issues, and we're going to keep the one that's 12 years old, but we're going to get rid of this one because we're spending $30,000 a year, and it
It's
doesn't
like a
make
big
sense.
picture of like how much we're putting in for repairs
Right.
versus like what the worth is. So.
Correct. Yep.
Nice. And obviously there's a lot of key players that kind of come together throughout the year to put together this budget. I mean, like you said, we're constantly working on it over the life cycle of the budget.
Yeah, I mean, as far as the who is that's involved in that process, obviously the select board starts it, and they're looking at the revenues, they're setting policies, they're guiding and focusing the strategic plan that we have in place, and really defining where it is that we're going to go for the next 2 to 3 years and what needs to be in the budget process. Finance committee as an institution, plays an outsized role, obviously, in the budget because they dig in line by line, as we talked about, and town meeting. Those are probably the three. I mean, the school committee, the school committee works with the superintendent as well in developing their side. So there's, kind of every time I talk about the select board up until this point, the school committee's mirroring that process for their side of the budget. And then it, kind of all comes together through the finance committee and out to town meeting to sell that. So those are really the big players on the executive side, finance committee, and then the legislative side over there at town meeting.
And we kind of just closed out, I mean, it's almost like you said, the end of the month, but like the summer and fall, we got to see some of the financial forecasts. You did one 5-year for the board, and then we did one with the school committee per the 2021 override commitment. What does the town do to kind of plan and forecast for the future? Like, what are we looking at? Which is a really big question.
Yeah, no, I mean, so we look backwards more than we look forwards because our business is really stable, right? We kind of do the same things every year. We evolve how we do things. We modernize how we do things. When we looked at the need for the override that was passed in 2021, we went back 20 years and looked at averages and data. So we do that on an every year basis, and what we interject is all that new stuff that we learned over the last 12 months, and now we're dealing with inflation. I don't think anyone was really talking about inflation a year ago,
Right.
but we're thinking about that. How's it going to impact the budget? So we look back and look at percentages and percent changes, and Dave will talk about crazy formulas that he's brought in and compounded average growth rates to really modernize and improve our process. We do a lot of analysis to make sure. The last thing we want to do is get to the budget process and say we have $100 million and end up with 95.
Right, right.
Because that's going to make a lot of people mad. So we spend a lot of time doing the forecast and looking backwards to ensure that we're conservative in our approach moving forward.
The last 3 years, yeah, it's been 3 years. I think the pandemic has brought a new lens to how we look at a bunch of different topics, but especially with the budget, it made us look at things differently. And did that kind of change how we've planned or just other things we've kept in mind, just thinking about the future? Because I think 4 years ago, the last thing anyone thought was we would be in a pandemic for 3 years.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. There's a great period of stability before the pandemic, and I think sometimes, no matter how hard you try not to, you get comfortable with year-over-year revenue growth, relying upon things like motor vehicle excise to grow each and every year and to be a very stable part of your operations. And, we're talking about supply chain issues and chip issues and slowing down manufacturing processes and inflation. And so all those terms that are being introduced into people's daily lives and their business lives is impacting us. So we do look at revenues a little bit differently than we did for the 2020 budget, because we're just not as confident that they're going to be there year after year. And we don't, again, want to be in a position where we're not conservative in our estimates and we fall short at the end, because that has a really negative impact, not only for that year, but the following year.
Clearly, you have a lot of insight on budgeting, and kind of throughout your career, you've obviously had experiences that got you to this point to be able to lead a town with a over $140 million budget. Do you have any advice for younger professionals or people that might be looking to get into municipal finance to gain experience in this very volatile area?
Yeah. Don't be afraid of it. That's my first rule. It's big numbers, but really it's just addition, subtraction, and percentages. That's all of the complexities that we're really working with. So you can't be afraid of the budget. I think it's critical for anyone early in their career that wants to one day move into general management. You have to learn the budget. You have to understand where the money comes from, where it goes, and how you put it all together. And in your early career, you want to start in those bite-sized chunks, right? You don't want to come in and manage the whole budget. You want to say, well, how does the department develop their budget? How does the division develop their budget? What do we need for salaries? And then what's another bucket? Expenditures. So just start with very small parts and dive in. And the more detailed you get into the budget, the more simple it gets. So if you look at the budget and the balance sheet and you look at all the ins and outs, you're like, oh my God, I don't know how this comes together. But turn a few pages back in the budget and look at an individual department. Don't be afraid of it. Roll up your sleeves, and it's really basic math at that point. So, but maybe we should ask Dave the same question.
We should. I'll ask Dave the same question.
Right, so
he's a good thought experiment.
Yeah. So I guess at this point, it will be our pleasure to have the new Assistant Town Manager for Administration and Finance, David Snowdon, a longtime Shrewsbury resident, will be commissioned the budget czar at the end of this episode to join us here on the Town Manager Download. Good afternoon, Dave. Welcome to the Town Manager Download. It's great to have you on.
Thank you very much. Really happy to be here.
Awesome. Get you in here on these early and founding episodes, so I'm super excited to have you. I'm really grateful to have you in your new role as Assistant Town Manager for Administration and Finance. I won't say that too many times so we don't have a 10-hour-long episode. It's a big title. Let's start there, though. Tell us about your career path into local government, how long you've been with the town, why are you in this career path, those things. Tell us about yourself.
Of course. Thanks. Been with the town now for a little more than 5 years. Came in 2017. My career path has been a little convoluted. I think I can honestly thank Amy Poehler doing business as Leslie Knope for this.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
But
she hasn't been on the town manager.
she
dialogue
hasn't, but I
yet.
think we could probably get her
probably
on.
yeah.
Yeah.
No doubt.
But yeah, in all seriousness, I actually started my undergraduate career at University of Massachusetts Amherst as a history major and political science minor. Started wanting to be a teacher at first. And was enrolled in sort of like that career path. And after a little while, realized I probably wanted to do more graduate work than maybe secondary education. So I had a really brief stint in graduate school right after undergraduate, and I realized, you know what, I'm not ready yet. So I changed tacks and moved to Maine and studied boat design.
Boat design.
Yeah, changing tacks, you get it?
I don't.
So yeah, I was at the landing school in Maine, and I studied boat design, and it was really there where I was.
Wait.
Yeah,
Landing school, but boats.
It's
so not
correct.
airplanes.
not airplanes, no.
Okay.
Not sailing
Okay.
school either.
Not airboats either,
No.
or like
The landing school, and you design boats.
Correct.
I'm just trying to keep up.
No, it's
Okay.
good. Yeah,
Boating
yeah.
school
You
for
got to keep me
Yep.
in check.
All right.
But it was at the landing school in Maine where I really was able to develop my analytical problem-solving skills and project management skills. That was my main takeaway. I started a small career building composite rowing shells for a while. And after being in the private sector, I realized I needed something more. This is where Amy Poehler really came in. And I needed to give back and have a greater engagement. I found a nonprofit organization called Community Rowing in Brighton, Mass, whose vision was to provide rowing to all, to just make sure there was no barriers. And my time there was really formative for my career. I got to connect with people on a whole new level, and I really realized that that's what I wanted to be doing. Living in Boston at the time, Northeastern wasn't too far away, and I enrolled into their MPA program for public administration. And after my first year there, I was lucky enough to find a job within the town manager's office in Shrewsbury. Was very excited to apply, and I got to meet Kevin and Kristen Loss, the other assistant town manager at that time. I started as an administrative assistant to the town manager in Shrewsbury. And from there, I've had the opportunities to grow into roles like the business analyst, an interim COA director, the DPW business manager, and most recently, assistant town manager of administration and finance.
Nice.
Yeah.
When I think back on what you've done for the town, Dave, you've really taken the budget process and the budget to the next level. We develop a separate revenue manual. That was your idea. There's a lot of important steps that you put in the process to assess revenues that we had never done in the past. You really professionalize the documents and things like that. So there's no one that can pick up the budget in town that doesn't see the work that you've done. And it's really been wonderful to see that evolution over the last few years, and I appreciate all your work on that. And we'll dive into those things in a little bit more. But so tell me the day-to-day. What's the assistant town manager for finance do? What are you responsible for? How does it all work?
Yeah, but, well, and thank you, by the way. I think one of the reasons why you've been able to develop such an amazing team is you give credit and you take blame. So thank you very much. Obviously, there's a lot of work that goes involved. But yeah, the basic role. I see myself as advocating and supporting departments that are housed within the administrative and financial departments, which include accounting, assessors, town clerks, treasurer collector, and then the IT, which is sort of like a shared role with Selco.
Sure.
They're departments that have clear out-facing public roles, but there's also a lot of support for other departments in town. So I'm here to make sure that they can function and be the best departments they can be, and make sure we provide all the services for the town.
Yeah, those departments I really see, they do. You're absolutely right. So a lot of people obviously know about the tax collector and the assessor's office and things like that. But those departments, 70% of their work is all internal facing and supporting other departments, and none of those other departments really work without that core administration and finance team. So it's always been my favorite side of the house, to be honest with you, how these can enable and operate and improve and support all the other aspects of the organization. So, no, that's great. So you've been in the role since early November.
Halloween.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah, nice.
He was in there.
Scary
That's
day.
that's who that was.
I
that
know,
came
yeah.
to the office that day. Any challenges that you've been dealing with in those first few months?
I mean,
Big time of the year, tax bills coming out, and
yeah, I mean, there's been challenges, but it's all part of the job. Like, switching vendors, and there's like headaches and trying to make sure that all the processes that we've been doing in the past are going to operate the same. But honestly, there's more opportunities. The work that the selectmen and the two of you, Taylor and Kevin, have done on the strategic plan has provided us a lot of ways to create budget narratives, and that's what I feel like I'm trying to do a lot now with my team is make sure we can really tie our budget requests to the strategic plan and develop a story for the residents to better engage with the work we do.
yeah, thanks. You're a Shrewsbury resident, Dave?
I am. Can you believe it?
Yeah, I know you have your wife Becca and two kids here in town. So, how long have you been in Shrewsbury?
Yeah. Well, we moved back in 2014, and now I'm further burdening the town with my own offspring. So, sorry, school department, with what they will bring at some point. But I was born in Worcester and
Yep.
was raised in Shrewsbury.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I didn't even have to like convince my wife to come back here.
Yeah.
She actually found the house. Which,
Oh, nice.
yeah. Isn't that great?
Yeah.
Yep.
So she's not originally from Shrewsbury.
She is not. No,
Okay.
she's from Ohio.
Okay.
But a Shrewsbury friend of mine introduced us.
Nice. Oh, wow.
Actually,
a lot of Shrewsbury ties.
Yeah. All of my really close friends are from, the elementary school.
Yeah.
And we're still really close.
And how's that experience for you thus far, working and living in the same time? In the profession, behind the scenes, we know it's a lot of challenges, and sometimes you don't feel like you get to break away from the work, and sometimes you're just outside mowing the lawn and someone wants to talk. What's your experience been?
It really is like a give and take. You're right. Like at there's a sense of pride. Like I really do care about this town, and I want to do as much as I can. But then there's times when someone asks what you do, and the response may be, I work in local government. Because there have been situations that I've been caught, and they're like, well, do you think you could do this for me? And I was like, I can't. I'm sorry. Like, you don't want to get in those conversations, right?
Yeah.
But more often than not, like I like my job a lot, and I'm really proud, and I like being in the town.
Yeah, yeah. It's a great perspective to have. There's balance. There's good. There's bad. No matter where you live, where you work, what you do, what you don't do, it's all a balance in life, and I appreciate that perspective that you have. So, we talked a little bit about the work that you did, a few years ago, making improvements. We haven't talked about that transparency part of getting the budget online, using a tool that is called ClearGov. So why don't you talk a little bit about how we develop the budget and how the residents can view that from a technological standpoint?
Yeah. Well, I mean, the basic budget process, and I know you've covered a lot of this already, we could say starts maybe in December right now if we're talking about budget creation. From the town manager's office, there's a request sent out to departments. We have this amount of revenue. We anticipate that you can increase your budgets this percentage. And typically the first week in January, the department heads will submit that budget request. We do have this amazing tool, ClearGov, now, where all of those requests can be viewed by residents once we push that out. So once the budget is sort of produced in the first fiscal projection around the middle of February, residents can go in there. They can drill down into the exact line item to really understand what's being spent and where it's being spent. And there's also some really neat tools where they can understand, well, how much of my my tax revenue that I generate is going to fund certain programs.
Sure.
We're really trying to give everyone the opportunity to see how they contribute to all the work that they need and we do. Yep.
Yeah, and that's really that evolution that I've been so impressed with, Dave, is when we started on those first budgets that we worked on in 2017, we've really migrated from scanning a PDF and putting it online to residents being able to click down to whatever level of the budget or stay up at whatever level of the budget that they want to at their own time, fully searchable. And that's just a huge benefit to transparency and helping people understand what it is that we do, which is a primary driver behind the town manager downloads and having these conversations. So
It's a living, breathing document.
It really
and
is.
like,
Yep.
it needs to be accessible in that manner as well.
Yep. So when you left the town manager's office and you went upstairs in the town hall, you worked for the Department of Public Works. Even before you got up there, there's a Shrewsbury is a town that is full service. We do a lot of things that a lot of other local governments don't do. We have our own water department, sewer department, collect our own trash. Happens a lot in most local governments across the country, but not all communities in Massachusetts do that. And I know water and sewer rates are something that you and I have spent a lot of hours on trying to figure out the best way to develop those rates. So talk a little bit about the process that goes into setting a water and sewer rate and how we go from knowing that we're going to sell 3 billion gallons of water a year and raising just enough money to cover that cost. How do you do that?
Yeah, and there's so many different angles you can look at it, but I mean, we can go back to sort of how we start the budget process, and we need to understand what are our expenses, and what's the priorities of the water or sewer department, and how do we provide what the residents want in the next 5 to 10 years. When we have an understanding of our expenses, both operational and capital, we really can then start to devise a rate structure that will provide that revenue. But it can't just be, one and done. We need to make sure that residents that are using a certain amount of water are charged an appropriate amount of water for that. Sort of like the pay-as-you-throw program, you're paying for what you throw away.
Sure.
And it needs to be equitable in that manner. There's a lot of work that goes into that, and we take it seriously. We want to make sure that we're not overburdening one customer class versus another.
Yeah. What's a customer class? What would that be, Dave?
It's a great. So we have our residents,
Sure.
which are customers. We have commercial customers. We have municipal and other departments that are our own, and then among them there's variation depending on how much water, a small, we'll say, gas station might need versus a larger commercial businesses that are using a lot of servers or something like that.
Sure.
So there's different volume that is needed for each one of those customer classes.
But I imagine and know that water and sewer rates, we have something like 205 miles of water main and 140 some miles of sewer main. How do you go about assessing the capital needs and budgeting for that?
Yeah. It's a lot of work again.
Yeah.
I mean, we have some good consulting support on each utility. So for water and sewer, we each have some consultants we work with that sort of help develop our capital needs and plans. There's obviously the ideal wish list. If we had unlimited funds, we would, and unlimited staff, we would do all these projects.
Right.
But that's not always the case, just like the general fund budget. So we need to layer them in over a certain number of years to make sure we're meeting the lifetime of certain capital projects, and we're not, again, overburdening the residents with too much work, which then increases the rate.
Yeah. So when we think about a water main, how long does a water main last, and then how do you budget for that replacement?
Yeah. I mean, we're on like 100-year cycle.
100 years.
100 years, yeah. You
Okay.
think of that, yeah?
Yep.
Which
So
is impressive
we're
because there's
never
not
gonna-
many things that you think
Yeah,
that are
yeah,
on that
yeah.
100-year cycle anymore.
So you're only going to replace water mains once during your career.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, no. Yeah, and ideally, we want to try funding so we're slightly better than that as well. We want to maybe be, because obviously things happen. We need to make sure we have the funding available for any instance that comes up. We may have a water main that's 75 years old that's doing great, and then one that is 30 years old that for whatever reason it fails.
Sure.
So in theory, we want to make sure that we're replacing a specific amount each year so that by the end of 50 years, we've covered the town.
Sure. Yep.
And granted, we may have a plan of what roads or what mains we want to do, but things change as emergencies come up.
So something like 2 to 4 miles per year.
Yep.
In theory.
Yeah.
What's that cost?
Do you want to know?
Well, I hope
It's like $3 million.
$3 million.
Yeah.
A year.
It's a lot of money. And it's tough because that's underground. And
Yeah.
it's not like it's not something people can. It's not tangible. It's a lot of money that sunk in the ground.
So Taylor, I've just figured out a way to get real answers from departmental leadership. We bring them all the time. We put them on the spot.
Yeah, there you
And then
go.
I get do you really want to know that answer?
Yes,
town
I do.
manager. No, that's great. Yeah, I know water and sewer rates are something that, something that we touch often, and we just have to keep feeding that system. And it's kind of out of sight, out of mind for a lot of residents. I know most people do think about those things. So much, the term infrastructure gets thrown around so much, and we think about that on a day-to-day basis. And really, how are we gonna make sure that we don't have excessive failures and the system's reliable, and we have a $15 million treatment plant that is at the head end of all of that we have to think about as well. And sewer, we partner with a lot of other regional entities
Correct,
and
yep.
work with them to share costs over time. So yeah, a lot of moving parts and pieces whenever you're developing those budgets and thinking about that. So I think it's time that maybe we should dive into a couple resident questions. Taylor, you want to throw those out there to Dave if they're
these-
hard and
yeah.
me if it's easy?
You can discern which is which.
Dice rolls.
And a lot of these, I think, they came up a lot when I was reading through all the surveys from our strategic plan because they're open-ended. So there are fake but real resident questions because
Sure.
they were asked, but not through our email
Not
address.
through TM download at
Shrewsbury.gov.
Right.
A question that came up a lot was, what does the town do to keep our taxes as low as possible? And that's on
Yeah,
the perspective of like fixed incomes
Yeah.
and just sign of the times of what people have been going through the last 3 years.
So I think we've talked a lot about that already. Like we do that planning. We do that, we understand what it takes to manage the process effectively, right? We don't want to do things as cheap as possible. We want to do quality projects that provide the greatest value to the town. And in the long run, that will keep the tax rate as low as possible. There's state limits, Dave. Maybe you want to talk about Proposition 2.5 that we're forced to keep the tax rate
Correct. Yep.
down.
Yeah. It was in the 1980s.
Yep.
I was too young at that point in time, but it's when Prop 2.5 went into effect,
know
and
what
we.
he's
I didn't exist.
Yeah.
1980. Take us back.
All right, way back.
Yep.
All right, so
Prop 2.5.
Prop 2.5, and so it basically set a limit for how much towns could raise, and basically whatever their tax levy amount was at that time was the base structure. So, which sort of, in some regards, it set some towns off on a tough climb to actually reach up with inflation
Yeah,
and other matters
right,
going
yep.
forward. And you touched upon inflation earlier, and if our revenues can only increase from the tax levy, which is 60% of
Yep.
our revenue, by 2.5%, but inflation is double, triple that.
Right.
We have to be very creative in how we're going to provide services or where we're putting those dollars.
Right, and that's going to be a sensitive spot in this budget. Gasoline prices certainly have gone up more than 2% in the last year. Natural gas prices, which we're a consumer of, electric prices, which we're a consumer of, but thank God we have Selco. They're a little less than the investor-owned utilities, but still, those things have all gone up more than 2.5%, but our revenues can only increase. So
Exactly.
we have that state limitation keeping our taxes as low as possible. And then a lot of new initiatives have come forth that have been suggested by Ruth Anderson, who's our assessor, to provide taxpayer relief. So there's certain characteristics, whether it's income level or age or differently abled status or veteran status, that residents can apply for a tax abatement, which is a simple reduction in their taxes if they meet various qualifications and criteria. So we encourage all residents, especially this time of the year, as Ruth says when she does the tax rate, look at your bill, understand what you're eligible for, and apply, right? Like, we budget for that each and every year. We don't want residents to pay any more than they can. If they're due an abatement or an exemption, we want to give that to them. We want to keep them in the community because we know that's a big part of it.
And to that point, Kevin, I may be a little early to say, but we're also trying to have similar credits on the utilities for those same residents that meet those abatements, because we understand that all these increases, they add up across the board.
They really do.
Yep.
I'm working on the tax relief committee.
Yeah,
as
tax.
well.
Yep. Yeah, and that's a pool of town funds that were donated to the town from residents, businesses that will offset taxpayers' bills, and there'll be some criteria, but we hope that they're a little bit more relaxed
Yeah.
than the state. So it'll be a need-based program because we don't have unlimited funds there, but it's just another way that, and that's a really, all these driving issues was something that the select board has talked about time and time again, to make sure that we keep residents in the community.
I think just to give kudos to Ruth, every time, or I guess I've only been here for 2, but the last 2 times she's come in to do the tax reclassification hearing with the select board, she's done a really good job kind of going into detail and explaining how the tax levy works and what that calculation is. I feel like I get a free free
education.
lesson
Yeah.
every time she comes in. She does such a good job, and
No doubt.
it's always super helpful whenever I have questions about that stuff.
And that's Ruth Anderson. She's a rock star.
Yeah,
Yes.
yep, that's right.
Yep.
Super lucky. And Dave, you kind of started to talk about it a little bit when you were talking about our ClearGov, the ability for residents to kind of see what their tax dollars are funding. But do you want to talk a little bit more about what tax bill funds, what goes into our town?
That's a great question. I mean, if you think of on a zoomed out picture, 60% of our budget is funded by the tax dollars. And then if we had to then break that up, if we took up proportions of the tax bill based off of what they include in the general fund budget, that's sort of how it breaks down. So rough numbers, I think you said it was about 80 million was the schools,
Right.
out of a $140 million budget. So you could take that percentage. I should be able to do this in my head right now, but I'm afraid I'll make up a number.
So I don't blame you.
60%, 55 million.
So,
60, yep.
so 60% of a resident's tax bill may be going to fund aspects of the school. Now there are these things that might change that slightly, because we do have some restricted school aid that might need to go fund. But that's a great, good way to look at it.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's, I said it a little bit earlier when we were talking about utility budgets and the differences. So when we think about big, broad programs that benefit everyone, that don't have any individual drivers, like you don't know when you're going to need the police, you don't know when you're going to need the fire department, you don't know when you're going to need an ambulance, and the demand for the service is absolute. Like when you need that, we need to ensure that it's there. That's what we use tax dollars for. But whenever it's more discretionary, whether you're coming to a recreation program or going to a program at the senior center, or you're deciding how much water to use, then that's whenever we charge specific amounts to it. So those big broad categories, public safety, those things are all funded with the tax levy. So yeah, we appreciate those questions. We hope people will email us more often at tmdownload@shrewsburyma.gov so we can answer your questions and drive what you want us to talk about in future episodes. So Dave, maybe in our final part here, why don't you take a look ahead, tell us what you're looking forward to in your new role here at the town, and maybe even just focus on the next few months, what's going on.
I'm excited about a couple projects. I'm hoping at some point Julie Tierney might be coming on as well. I think she's doing a lot of great work, and she's really helping definitely the administrative and finance team. We're looking into some workforce management software. I think that could really improve, again, like sort of the spine of all of our operations and help every department work better. Working with Taylor, I'm excited about communication and engagement options. We're only going to be as good as we're able to communicate with everybody, and that's something I'm excited about, especially as it ties, again, to the strategic plan. We need to create budget narratives that residents can understand and want to engage with, and I like working with the team I have right now, trying to make those connections. Yeah, those are probably the big things. And
Yeah, I mean, you're now, in more of a role of a leader of leaders, right? Really orchestrating and guiding and setting a vision and helping build the culture. And we're excited to have you on board for that with all the experience that you've had. And I'm sure folks will keep their eye on the budget process a little bit closer, and hopefully they go to ClearGov and access the resources that we've talked about on today's episode and dive in with us in the budget process. We don't want to sit at the town hall on a nice cold March Saturday by ourselves. We'd love to have residents there with us. So we encourage you all to come out and participate in the budget process one way or another. Keep your eye out for those papers for elected positions coming up in January. And Dave, I'd want to thank you for coming on, taking the time out of your day.
It was great.
Sacrificing that to be here with Taylor and I on the Town Manager Download. It's been another great conversation. Reminder to residents, once again, if you want to reach us, you can reach us at tmdownload@shrewsburyma.gov. So on behalf of Taylor Galusha, I'm Kevin Mizikar, Town Manager of the Town of Shrewsbury. Thank you for listening.